G'day, Nick.
Warwick, how are you?
Oh, I'm pretty excited. I can't lie. And it's not about your joke.
Oh, really? I was
I'm
so
sorry.
excited myself that you might be excited about my joke for a change.
I could pretend to be excited.
All right, are you ready? Let's just
Okay,
cut to
I'm
the
ready.
chase.
Get it over and done with.
What do you call it when two boats fall in love?
Nope, don't know.
A romance.
Oh my gosh, it's better than the plagiarism one that I just took about 15 minutes to figure that one out.
I can't believe you didn't get that one before I said it.
Fell off my motorbike too many times. All right, Nick, we've got an interesting guest today.
Yeah, we've got a great guest. In fact, when I spoke to my extended family about today's guest, they were all pretty excited.
Well, people who listen to the podcast already know who the guest is because you have to click on the damn episode. It's not like radio, which, that's my boyhood dream is to be on radio, where they're like, oh, who's the guest going to be? Listening live to the radio. In fact, you listening to this, have clicked on it and gone, why do they do this? We already know who the frigging guest is. Just get on with it.
Maybe we've just rolled through on their Spotify playlist.
Oh, it just automatically came up.
Yeah, there you go.
After they were listening to someone really famous.
So, crime story.
All right, I'm going to stop stuffing around. Wayne Pearce, welcome to the show.
Nice to meet you, and Nick. Very good joke to start the proceedings.
Oh, come on,
Thanks,
mate.
mate.
I liked it anyway. Okay.
Don't try and butter up the lady on the show, mate. It's not going to get you anywhere.
No, it'll get you a long
Actually,
way.
it'll get you everywhere, Wayne. It'll get you everywhere. We're all old enough that still works.
And great to be here. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for joining us.
Now, I'm going to fess up that my grandfather, he was one of the most fanatical Balmain supporters that you would ever wish to never meet. He was a bit of a thug, I got to admit. But he was my favourite pop. He was a fantastic man. But I just remember him sitting on the couch that still had the plastic on it that my grandmother would never take off, in the lounge room that had the plastic runners on the carpet that you would never allowed to remove. And if anybody disturbed him when the Tigers were playing, you were in deep trouble. So I'm just stoked to be chatting to you on the podcast. Pop's no longer with us, obviously, left us quite a few years ago now, but I think he would be very, very proud that his grandson is chatting to the Wayne Pearce, mate.
Well, thanks, Woz. I mean, there's a lot of fanatical Tiger supporters, a lot of fanatical footy supporters out there, but there's so many Tiger supporters that just had nothing to cheer for over recent years. But fingers crossed, 2024 is going to break the drought. But I feel really privileged to have had the opportunity to pull the black and gold jumper on, and it's very special in my heart. Never wanted to leave the club. In fact, I caught up with just a couple of nights ago with Locke Roach and Benny Elias and Paul Siren, and just for dinner and the wives, and we're still so close together as mates after all this time.
Yeah.
That's the coolest thing. I think when I talk to my children, even, I feel like that's missing somewhat nowadays, the blind loyalty to one club. I don't see that in the younger generation, unless, of course, they're gifted the sweet spot where it all comes together and the money's right and the conditions are right and it all becomes right. But even in watching my children as they grew up, I've got 3 boys that all played the game and they're very fanatical followers still. And they have even changed their teams over the year, except for one who's always been with the same. But they've ebbed and flowed over the time. And I just don't see that real one-eyed fanatical support that we all had as kids. And certainly, I think in the last couple of generations, it was still very strong. And there's just that big change. Wayne, is that something that you would agree with?
Yeah, I sort of noticed that. There's been a generational shift, I think, in terms of what it means to be loyal. Because you look at the players as well. When I played, if you change clubs mid-career, admittedly the money wasn't around like it is now, but change clubs mid-career, then that was somewhat unusual. Now it's unusual if you stay at the one club for your full career, and so that's understandable that the fans, particularly the younger generation, are like that because they have a shorter horizon upon which they expect their club to win a competition or to be successful. So that's just the way of the world. The world's changing, and temperaments are changing as well.
I think there's sorry, Nick.
No good.
I think there's a massive parallel there between what's happened to footy or any sport really, any team sport especially, and what's happened to business and teams in corporations, in small business, where once upon a time you got a job with a company and you stayed with them long term because that was how you got looked after and it was what was expected and it was just seemed to be one of the common values. Whereas now it's more like footy. You got young people chasing the next big deal and the next springboard, and loyalty seems to be a word that's perhaps a little lost in business and employment land. Is that?
Yeah, I
think
that's a good point. I think it's a two-way street. Businesses have to accept some responsibility for that in terms of the culture that they are presenting to their staff. If you've got a culture that supports employees in terms of their growth, and which is really what I think the core element of what the smart employees are looking for is to grow and develop their skill set. Because in a rapidly changing world, which is where we live and operate nowadays, in a rapidly changing world, the currency of employment is your ability to upskill and adapt to the changing landscape. So if employers are providing that opportunity, they're not going to lose as many employees as organisations that are not. But even in an environment where you're still providing those opportunities for growth and there's a really positive, trusting culture, you're still going to get a turnover, I think, because you have those employees that outgrow that organisation, or that team, or that business. And it's going to happen. But I think there's certainly some work you can do and measures you can put in place to reduce the turnover. And a small amount of turnover is healthy, actually, in organisations, in footy teams, in businesses.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think there has to be an attrition rate. It's normal with sport. It's normal with businesses. It's important that we have that change in a measured way. And there's so much that we can do to support the frequent turnover not being the default culture within the business. Wayne, I'd love to take us back a step or two and maybe talk about that transition. So clearly you've had this amazing career in football. Where do you go after football, and how on earth did that journey lead you to what you're doing now?
Good question. What do you do after footy? Well, back when I played, it wasn't as much of a shock to the system because you had to work a job. So I worked in the played footy in the part-time era where you had a job, and when you scored a try in a game, at the bottom of the screen it had your name and it had underneath that occupation.
Yeah.
There was labourers, there was bricklayers, there was whatever. My occupation was actually school teacher for a couple of years. Then I moved. So when I finished school, I went to university. Actually, I did a science degree. I did 4 years of psychology there, which was really whet my appetite for the potential that exists, that's latent in human beings. And then I did a dip ed as well because teaching, because I was passionate, I wanted to try and crack it as a rugby league player. Mm-hmm. So for me, the teaching hours were great because you finish school at 4:00 and then you start your training at 4:30 to 5. That worked out quite well. So I actually did that. So when I finished, and I only taught for a couple of years, and then I started playing representative football. I started playing for Australia, and it was too hard to get time off work. So I moved into a sales role. So in the middle of that, I worked 2 years. I was employed full-time by the rugby league. First person to be employed full-time by the rugby league, going around to schools talking about the value of sport, rugby league, and health and fitness. So I did that for a couple of years and then got burnt out. I worked about 500 schools, and then thought I got to do something a little bit more with a bit more variety. And then so I started selling advertising for the Channel 10 television network, who were the primary broadcaster of rugby league back in those days. So I was selling advertising, and that was really good because that gave me an insight into the business world and the challenges that the business world have. And that really whet my appetite for the great opportunity in business to really improve their teamwork, improve their productivity through improving their teamwork, and improving their motivation and leadership capability. So that sowed the seed for later on, many years later, to when I finished playing rugby league, I worked a couple of years in the media, but then I actually went back and coached for 7 years. And then 23 years ago, I finished coaching, and then I took that broad skill set that I had acquired, and took a bit of time off and had to think about where could I apply this that I would get really a lot of satisfaction, but that there will be a demand for it. And that's when I took the skills to the business world and started working as a consultant with companies, because there's a massive gap in that teamwork space in business. In fact, there was a study done by Korn Ferry, about 10 years ago. MBN Co. commissioned Korn Ferry to do a study and looking at where the leadership competency gaps were in business, and they identified the single biggest leadership competency gap in terms of their ability to it's the hardest to recruit and the hardest to train was building effective teams. The skills around building effective teams. So that was for me where I sort of put my efforts over the last couple of decades and really love it.
That's a fantastic, really brief ideal of your life, Wayne. That's really quite fascinating. And I just have this one burning question I'd love you to answer for me. As a parent, I was particularly invested in ensuring all of our children played team sport because of what I assumed would be a natural carryover to the rest of their lives. And I wonder if you have noticed in the people that you have worked with in the past 20 odd years, those that did play a team sport in their youth, are they more naturally a team player within an employment team or within their workplace than somebody perhaps that didn't play a team sport when they were a child? Can you see any parallel there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, not everybody that plays team sport will benefit, because there's some players that play team sport that are outliers, that are a little bit selfish, that really, they're not team players, but they're playing in a team. But the vast majority of people that play team sport, absolutely, I see some benefits that will significantly assist them in post their schooling and in their adult life. And it's not just around the teamwork, the camaraderie. It's around the discipline. It's around the focus. It's around setting goals. It's all those things that you don't necessarily get taught in school and don't really they're not part of the curriculum. But you gain those lessons experientially when you're playing, particularly the tougher competitive sports. If you're playing table tennis as a doubles or something like that, not got nothing against table tennis, but
you're right.
I don't think many of our listeners are playing table tennis professionally,
it's the sport. No, it's the sports that really require you to dig deep and
Yes.
support your mates and pick them up when they're down and those types of things. And there's rugby league's just one of those, and there's plenty of them.
Yeah.
Well, I'm always fascinated. Well, there's a couple of things in even just that little conversational thread. And you've been in the education environment, Wayne. You know, we often talk to guests on the show and we talk to business owners, and there's always these comments that we all make that, you know, they don't teach this in school, they don't teach that in school. And I sometimes think, what the bloody hell do they actually teach in school? Because so far I've not heard anyone say, oh yeah, they taught me all of that in school. Having come through that education environment, not that I'm asking you to fix it for anybody, because I'm sure there's a lot of parents who wish you would, but is that a gap that you see or have noticed?
I actually do a fair bit of work in the schools, actually, at the moment with teachers. There are some significant gaps, and teachers are under the pump at the moment because there's so much paperwork that they've got to do, and back end stuff, which detracts from the focus of actually teaching. It's the governance piece around the world that we're in at the moment, unfortunately. But there's simple things that can really benefit that are not taught at the moment. For example, communication. There's zero education around communication, around the different channels of communication, how you communicate effectively with different types of people, which is it's a primary. It's a massive gap. There's massive gap in the space of mindset, managing your mindset. How do you actually get yourself up when you're flat? There's a whole lot of stuff in that space. They sort of touch on a little bit, but there's some contemporary views and ideas in that space that are not being shared. There's some just gaps in just general adaptive skills around managing finances and stuff like that. I mean, which are a little bit more advanced stuff, but still, I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff that can be taught that is not being taught at the moment. But you've got to get the basics right. You've got to get your arithmetic and your reading and writing right first, because that's fundamental. But there's, I think, particularly that communication and mindset pieces are really critical, because that differentiates whether or not you're going to be able to handle the pressure of the pressures that are being thrust upon you as you move through and navigate adulthood.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it leans into a conversation that we have occasionally here on the podcast around talent versus skill. And I think sport is a fantastic window into this, where a lot of punters probably think that great sports people just were born talent. And I'd love to get your perspective on this, Wayne, because I actually don't believe that. I think most of it is hard work and dedication and consistency and skills development in all areas. And I feel like it's the same in business, where a lot of business owners think, and I've said this in a recent episode as well, a lot of business owners think that, I just wasn't cut out for this, or I'm just no good with numbers, or I just don't have the people stuff. I'm not great with people. I think most of that, if not all of it, can be learned. But I'm keen on your experience, mate, because you've been through both. You're now in the business world, but you've been in that sporting arena for a heck of a long time.
Yeah, I agree. Talent's overrated, without a doubt. I mean, the key factor, the key ingredient, and I look back on my life and the whole lot of people that I've engaged with over the years that have been really successful, and what the key differentiator is desire. Okay, desire will overcome talent gaps any day of the week. There's no doubt though that we're all wired as human beings differently, and when our passion or talent, our passion or desire matches and meets and overlaps with the talent, that's when you've got a massive opportunity to become really great at what that is. For some people it's athletics, for some people it's numbers, for some people it's being a parent, whatever it is. But I mean, there's so many different areas of life that the sort of talent sits and is not tapped. But that desire is and passion is the thing that is going to enable the workload. And when you look at any of the great composers, the great writers, the great athletes, their work rate and their workload is phenomenal. You look at Nathan Cleary in rugby league, for example. He's and there's a whole lot of other great players as well. But Nathan is the first bloke to training. He's the last bloke off the training paddock. And in the grand final, which anyone watched the grand final, he was the one that won the grand final, and he did that because he had done the work, and he knew that he'd done the work, and he pulled the game out of the bag for them. So for me, it absolutely is that passion and desire that's really going to separate the people, not only that are going to be really great, but the people who are going to enjoy their life more. There's so many people getting up in the morning, going to work. They get on the bus, they don't talk to anybody. They're dreading going to work, but they've got to pick up a pay packet because they feel they've got to pay for a mortgage. Well, that's what I'm talking about. That there's a lack of education in those types of people, which starts and wasn't given at school. That's going to allow that could enable them to actually understand. Well, you're disempowering yourself because you don't have the knowledge of how to get to where you want to get to or where you want to get to. And that's the other big thing that for me, success in life is not a fluke. And when we start being strategic about our lives, we start setting long-term goals. And when you look at say Olympic athletes who are identified as young kids, they don't have a horizon of 2 or 3 years. They have a horizon of 5 or 10 years. And they know that's where they want to get to. And the sports psychologists work with them to set goals, to actually do the visualization work, to help the brain start to actually become programmed towards that outcome. And that's going to make a huge difference. And it's not just applicable to sports, it's applicable to business people, it's applicable to anybody. And business people and tradies that are listening to this, when you start to actually set those long-term goals, you start to internalize what that feels like to having achieved that, which is the visualization process. Then what happens is you start to then notice things, because the way the non-conscious brain works is quite fascinating. And the non-conscious brain can process around about up to around about 20 million bits of information per second. But we only take in around about 11 million bits of information per second. That's the non-conscious brain. But the conscious brain can only process 50 bits per second. So what gets distilled down to that 50 that we become conscious of is actually that process is governed by a mechanism in the brain called the reticular activating system. Now, the reticular activating system is going to let through information that's going to keep us safe, but also information that's linked to our values. But the third thing is information that's anchored or linked to where we want to get to. And that's why it's important to set those long-term goals, to actually start to feel and imagine what it's like in that space. And then you're going to see all these coincidences, all these opportunities going to come into your life that was not there previously, because the reticular activating system is allowing the conscious brain to now identify those opportunities. So, I mean, it might sound a little bit technical, but it's pretty simple. It's really about getting clear on where you want to get to. And most people aren't clear on that. Why? Because there's no goal setting programs taught at school or education.
School. We just blame school for everything, mate.
Well, it's school also, but it's actually where you do learn that sort of stuff is actually learn that when you start playing sports.
Yeah,
you start setting goals in sports teams, and they've got a good coach, good junior coaches. They're invaluable in terms of the life lessons.
Mm.
Like tuning the radio. We often talk about tuning the radio, and this is something we do a lot with our clients, particularly at the beginning of the year, but then we set markers during the year, so we continue to reevaluate those goals and then get reattuned into the correct frequency so that they can attract it like you're talking about. I guess I wanted to make that parallel with team. Many of us do it subconsciously or consciously, either way, as business owners, but I think we often miss the point of encouraging our team to do the same and involving them in our own business goals, but also getting involved in their personal goals, which can really help them get set and settled within the business and their comfort and how they want to move forward. Wayne, do you have a position on that, sharing those with your team and encouraging your team to do the same?
Absolutely. I mean, there's some interesting work done by Google back. The work was concluded in 2014 because Google, an interesting organization where they started in the late 90s, and their philosophy was to recruit the best talent from around the globe, and we'll pay them really well. We'll give them an experienced manager. We'll give them all the resources they need, and they're going to perform really well. What they found was that there was patchy teamwork around the globe. Okay, so some teams that were performing really well, but the vast majority were doing okay, but not really, really well, not commensurate with the pay packets that people are being paid. Mm. So what they did was they looked at through the lens, because they're a data-driven organization. They looked through the lens of data to see what it was that was driving these teams that were high performers that weren't there with the rest of the teams. And what they found was that there was one common element that just differentiated the high-performing teams from the rest, and that was a culture, what they called psychological safety. So a culture like psychological safety is basically a high-trust culture. And in those high-trust cultures, what that enables people to share information more openly. It allows them to get stuff done more quickly. There's better ideas, innovation, a whole lot of stuff. And one of the things that facilitates a culture of high trust is the leader taking that bulletproof mask off and the vest off and allowing themselves to be seen as human and allowing themselves to connect with their people. And that connectivity piece, that ability to have conversations around real person matters, is absolutely a critical element. And that's one of the things that you find in the high performance teams. Doesn't matter what sport you're talking about, the coaches are open and transparent around how they're feeling, how they see situations, and they encourage the players and provide opportunities for the players to get to know each other beyond just that superficial level, as is often the case in the workplace. And that, I think it's one of the reasons why you see examples of high performance teamwork in sport that you don't see in business, because a lot of businesses aren't addressing the core fundamentals that need to be addressed. And that's one of the things that I've really focused heavily on since I've been consulting over the last 20 years. And it's amazing how quickly businesses can turn around when they get the fundamentals right. There's other stuff as well, but psychological safety is a really critical element.
It boggles my brain. Sorry, Nick, I've jumped in again. It boggles my brain, Wayne, because sport, right? Even the upper echelons of professional team sport. I mean, we're not talking about multi-million-dollar lifetime payoffs for people on the team. I mean, it's big business and there's big bucks involved in certain codes, but the level of passion for this sort of stuff and the level of team communication and leadership that you see in even just, high-level club sport or state-based national competitions is phenomenal. And there's so much research put into it and effort put into that. And yet in business where, this pays people's mortgages, it puts kids through school, it sets people up for retirement, there seems to be a much lower level of interest in what we're talking about here with, this high trust culture and how leaders can lead compared to sport where you win a trophy. Whereas business is like life and death stuff. And there's this disproportionate focus put onto it. Can you give me some thoughts on why you think that is?
Absolutely.
Or if I'm barking up the wrong tree?
No, absolutely. You were spot on, Boz. One of the real challenges for most businesses is they're led by people who never ever played any high level sport. So they don't really. So what I'm saying is they're still looking at black and white television.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I can remember when black and white telly came in 1975. Sorry, when color television came in 1975, and I was living in a little one-bedroom shack in Balmain. 5 of us squeezed in this little one-bedroom every night, and we had a little black and white television. And I loved watching all the shows back then. The old shows, Gilligan's Island, McHale's Navy, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, all in black and white television, right? And then what happened was in 1975 they switched on color television, but we never had it because we had black and white telly. And I remember not long after they switched it on, walking up through the main street of Balmain, which is where I grew up, and there was a store for those old people on here that maybe in my era, they'll remember a store in Balmain called Bennett's Electrical, which was like an early days version of Harvey Norman. Yep. And it had a glass window that went onto the street. And behind the glass window was all the appliances that were selling. This particular day, I'm walking up the main street and there's this massive crowd of people standing out the front of Bennett's Electrical, never like that normally, looking in the window. And I walked up, I had no idea because I forgot color television had been switched on just a couple of days before. And all these people, because Balmain in those days was very much working class and there wasn't much money around. A bit different now that all investment bankers live there now. But they're all looking in this window and I pushed me up and wow, it was color television. And I'd never seen color television or never had seen a screen for color TV, not the movies or anything like that. So I was just amazed and stood there for a couple of minutes. I was 14 years of age and I got pushed out of the way. And anyhow, but when I went back home, turned my black and white telly on, never was the same.
Yeah.
It was never had the same impact. And if I'd never seen the color telly, the black and white was going to be fine. And it's a bit like teamwork, because there's a lot of senior people in business, bosses in business that are still looking at black and white telly. They've never seen color telly, and therefore they don't really know what they're missing. Yet the businesses are underperforming for anywhere from 10% to 50% underperformance. And there's data around to show that you get your teamwork right, then the productivity is going to result increased productivity is going to result in increased profit and much improved culture. But to your point was, I mean, a lot of them they don't understand, don't know where to start, don't know how to go about it. There's zero books written. There's not one single book written on the science of teamwork. Okay, there's plenty of case studies around on this and this and this and this, but the collective science of teamwork, and there's some books that are called the science of teamwork, but they don't talk about all the fundamentals. They don't bring in all the research. I actually started writing a book when COVID hit, but then I got a couple of chapters into it, and then I got called got asked by the chairman of the Rugby League Commission to get a team together to get the rugby league back up and started when it shut down. So I ran that project, and then it was all about teamwork. It was really all about teamwork. So I had to put all the fundamentals into place that I've been teaching businesses for years, and it was great because we were pretty much we were the first collision sport in the world to resume and complete our competition during COVID. So it was pretty satisfying. But there's a lot of massive opportunity out there for businesses if they actually, and I'm not talking about massive big business. I'm talking about your small business as well. You've got 8 or 10 people and working in your business. There's you got 2 or 3 people working in your business. It's a great opportunity if you understand the science and fundamentals of teamwork to actually get a huge improvement in your outcomes.
To me, it's the greatest opportunity for business results. I don't want to call it success because everyone has their own idea about success. And ultimately, I think most of you listening to this episode would want to make more money, have more time back, have a better lifestyle. All of that involves having an enterprise that delivers more to you in less time input from yourself as the business owner. And so the key to leverage in business for me is team. You cannot do it on your own unless you, I don't know, win The Voice or something and get a multi-million-dollar contract singing pop songs with a millennial whoop in them or something or whatever it's called. But, when it comes to...
But I think the thing is, I think most people realise that if we get our teamwork right, there's going to be a huge upside. They don't know where to start. The single biggest enabler of high performance teamwork is the quality of the team leader. Okay? Because the team leader is the one that's got to enable it. They're the one that put all that sort of stuff into place. So, but leadership is not, once again, it's not something that's really taught.
So why don't more people do it, Wayne? That's the thing that I guess is the question for me is why don't more people go and tackle, pardon the pun, this whole leadership problem?
Well, the thing is, there's a patchy understanding of what that looks like. Now, team leadership really is about understanding the mechanics of what it takes to create a high performance team. Okay, and there's a massive amount of data that's patchy been done separately that it's not really been brought together. I've brought this stuff together and apply it. But there's things like you've got to create a high trust culture. You've got to get clear expectations. And that clear expectations really is in terms of where you're going to. People need to understand that. They need to understand their role in that. They need to understand how they're going to be remunerated in that. They need to understand what principles and values, how are we going to go about getting that? What are the rules? What are the team rules? They need to understand how to have the conversations with each other if things don't go right. And that's not taught in school either, because in the great teams, everybody keeps everybody accountable for agreed behaviours or outcomes, regardless of role or position. I'll say it one more time. Everybody keeps everybody accountable for agreed roles or outcomes, regardless of role or position. So what we're talking about here is people, if team members being able to keep their boss accountable if necessary, but actually keep each other accountable if necessary. And that's generally avoided because people don't have the skills on how to do that. So there's a fair bit of skill involved in this. It's not just something where you go, and I talk to, the other thing that's really important and really critical is a sense of purpose. People purposeful about their roles, and also celebrating achievements and creating that energized atmosphere. I mean, all that's really important. And then over and above that is essentially what I call sense of consciousness, which is everybody understands where they fit in the organization, and when changes happen, everybody's kept on the same page in that space. So, there's a number of pieces to the puzzle, but it's not too hard to actually start with the fundamentals. And the fundamentals is essentially building that high trust culture, or a platform of high trust, or psychological safety, as the gurus call it.
A lot of big terms in there. When realistically, what we're talking about, Wayne, is quite, I won't say it's easy, and it is simple. It's simple. I'm sure you have a framework, or you teach a framework to follow. And we do a similar kind of thing on a very fundamental type level. It's quite a simple ideal. Yes, it can be some hard work to put it in place, but the results speak for themselves. And if you're a tradie listening to this, and you've ever been blindsided by somebody leaving, or you've been blindsided by a client complaint, this is the kind of stuff that's missing from your business. We had a great chat this morning with one of our tradiepreneur members who was feeling rightly dissatisfied by the treatment towards them from a couple of their key team members. They were rightfully upset. And with a bit of questioning, what we realised is they missed the setting of the expectations piece with their team. And so the team didn't understand the process of what they're working through. So like I say, it's simple, not easy to navigate. And you as the leader is going to have to do some self-work to get where you need to be. However, I don't think there's anything more critical when it comes to driving those results that Warwick was talking about earlier. You can be self-employed and work for an hourly rate for the rest of your life, or you can create a fantastic team to help serve a greater purpose, both for you as an employer and your team members as well. It can just, I guess it's going to find where the information is, Wayne, and that brings me to my question. If I'm a tradie, I'm a man in the van, I'm listening to what we're talking about here, where do I even start?
Good point.
Don't play footy.
Yeah, good point. It depends if you want to. My spin on this, and my perspective on this, is if someone's done the work, then and they're reputable, then don't save you doing all the work that they've done. Why don't you pick up where they are at the moment and take off from there? I mean, so I've actually, and that's what I've done to get to where I've got to. And there's not one, as I said, there's not one book, one resource that sort of covers all this sort of stuff. I mean, I actually run programs for tradies, for educators, for business people, for anybody in that team, leading team space. And it's a leading teams workshop. I run a one-day workshop in that space, and it covers all the key elements. There's a workbook that you take away that's got a whole lot of activities in there that you can do with your people. That's where what I would suggest. If there's a whole lot of books you can read if you want to read books, but at the end of the day, I've done the work for you on that space. And if you want to learn about teamwork, and your time is precious, the most valuable resource you have is your time. You don't want to waste it. But if you could put a day aside and you want to take away a whole lot of stuff, starting with the fundamentals. And Nick, you made a very good point. It sounds complicated, but there are some simple things you can do to get started, and it's not that complicated. At an elephant, one bite at a time. So that's becoming a team leader, is really, there's one step at a time, but there's some things that are really fundamental and more important than others. And we sort of teach that in the program.
Nice, mate. Wayne, I've got a question for you. I've got a couple, actually. One's a reasonably serious question, which is unusual for me. If you had 1,000 tradies in a room, mate, what's one piece of advice you would like to leave them with?
I suppose it would be to actually be strategic about what you do and be intentional of what you do. There's two tips there. Strategic, what I mean is stay focused on where you want to get to, because that then, when you stay focused on where you want to get to, and you really keep that front and center, what happens is that will bring into your consciousness a whole lot of opportunities that are going to help you get there. So that's pretty important. The other one about being intentional is to use your time in a way that is most efficient. So, if you're going to go into a meeting, what is it you want to get out of that meeting? If today, what's the main thing I want to get out of today? So it sort of links back to the strategic piece, but it's a bit more here and now. So be intentional about what you want to do, because once again, that brings into play this reticular activating system, this mechanism in the brain that's going to allow me to actually make the best use of what it is that's around me. And this plays into what's thing called consciousness, which is a concept that no one's really nailed and understands how the non-conscious mind actually gathers this information. There's a spiritual element to it as well, but you don't have to be terribly spiritual to benefit from it. If you actually understand that by being strategic, by being intentional, it does make a huge difference. I hope I didn't confuse anybody here.
Unlikely, mate. Unlikely. And Nick, I've been cutting you off all episode. So would you like to ask a question before I hit him with my final one?
Well, I'm going to ask your final one for you on your behalf, if you like.
Oh, okay.
If our listeners are listening along and think, okay, I really got to get along to this training, where do they find out more about what you're up to?
I've got a website. It's waynepearceadvantage.com.au. There's a tab on there about upcoming events. I update those regularly. There's actually a fascinating communication program that I run as well, which I haven't talked about, which is called Process Communication, which was used by NASA to recruit and train astronauts for 3 decades. It's really fascinating about how to manage yourself under pressure, in distress, how to communicate effectively with different types of people, and so on and so forth. That's a really popular program as well. But there's different types of programs that I do run. But for me, I love working with different types of people. I love it when people come along to the sessions and they walk away going, wow, this is going to really help me, because my type of personality benefits from that.
Yes.
Love it. Now, Wayne, final question from me, mate. When's the last time you had a run on the paddock?
Run on the paddock?
Yeah. When did you last pick up a ball in anger, mate, and how did it go?
Well, I finished playing way back in 1990, and that was because my knees were pretty worn, and I ended up playing a charity game maybe 12 months later for, I can't remember what charity it was. There was a game, an Origin Legends, ex-Origin Legends game. I played that. It was up at Lang Park, and that was the last time I sort of laced on a boot. But my exercise now, I just come back not long from paddle on the harbour. I actually got a racing ski and paddle on the harbour because it keeps me off my knees. Nice. And then, but still get pretty fit. So it's been a long while. It's been 33 years now, pretty much since last year. It's 33 years. Yeah. Wow.
Goes in the blink of an eye. I'd love to be able to be 33 and cheeky and say, oh, that's only my lifetime, but it's not. It's not older than that.
Nice try, Nick.
I know.
Well, Wayne, thanks for your time on the podcast, mate. Fantastic to have a chat to the Wayne Pearce. I'm sure my pop is even prouder of me than he already was, mate.
Thanks, boys. It's been great just chatting to you and being able to share a few thoughts with your tradies out there. I mean, the thing is, most people are under optimized, and by that I mean most people don't have the understanding of how great they can be, and for me, I'm pretty average height, average weight, but I had identified an area that I was reasonably I was hungry, and that desire, together with a little bit of athleticism that I was blessed with, allowed me to get to where I got to. So, it's just been great to share some ideas. So thanks, Nick. Thanks, Woz. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you, Wayne.
Thanks, Wayne. Love it.